forward, back, forward, back. So our first speaker is Chris Ronson. He is the Senior Sales and Marketing Manager for Re-TRAC Connect. Re-TRAC is the leading waste diversion software system with over 30,000 users across North America. I liked the way, you're a nerd. I mean, you definitely are. He loves developing creative solutions to data management challenges. So data is what we're here about today. And then I've also found you went right to my heart with you love hanging out with your cat. So cats are another thing for me. So Chris, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Betsy. And there's my slides up here. For the last half an hour, I was freaking out because I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to see those slides as I was going through. So there is a nice little monitor here for those of you that don't know, which is fantastic. So a couple introductions. First of all, yes, thank you. Thank you all for being here. This is so exciting. So I did not think that like 20 years ago, if this is my obligatory nerd comment. Apparently, we need to do that when we come up here. But 20 years ago, had I been in a classroom, and first of all, no one would have said, everyone who's a nerd, raise your hands. And they definitely wouldn't have gotten applause after that. So that's kind of cool. But this is so exciting for me. I've gotten to watch the state measurement program grow. I was kind of initially involved in helping work through some of the conversations, and then I got to see the technical implementation of the program itself, and so I'm honored to be here to be able to speak very briefly. I only have 47 slides about the state measurement program in 15 minutes, so I'm going to be speaking really, really quickly. I'm going to be talking about just the overview of the program. How many of you have entered data into the state measurement program with a raise of hands? Awesome. So I'm preaching to the choir here. Many of you already know about the system and how it works, but I'm going to be giving a high-level overview of, the components of the state measurement program for those of you that don't know. And before I forget, also, this is very exciting, we are live streaming this measurement summit for those of you that don't know, and so there's the camera right there. No one's gotten a chance to say hello yet, so hello to all the live streaming people. So far it's working flawlessly. The AV people here is possibly the best AV company I've ever been introduced to, so can we get a round of applause for the AV people? Because it doesn't happen that often. Okay, so those are all my thank yous and introductions. I'm going to jump in and let's get started. So, I work for Emerging Knowledge, the company that developed Re-TRAC Connect, and that is the platform that the state measurement program uses to deliver the state measurement program. So, the program itself is made up of 4 components, and there is the state measurement template itself, which is really capturing the quantitative data. So about 15 questions covering solid waste, recycling, composting, import, export. I won't go into all great detail because I know that there's going to be a lot of talk about that later on, but that's the quantitative section that is filled out on an annual basis. Secondly, there's the SMM resources module, which is capturing more of the qualitative information, policy drivers, information at a qualitative level that is populated by you folks and kept up to date, which is really accessible and helpful for those that are looking for information about, is there a diversion target for a specific state? Being able to access that real time and easily that's relevant and kept up to date information is helpful. The third component is the feedback form, and so of course, as we know, we don't always agree, but we agree to disagree, which is good. And so the feedback form is a really useful tool that the states can fill out on an annual basis and contribute. So while not everyone is part of the implementation team and dealing with every single question, the feedback form is the state's opportunity to really give that feedback and have it be heard. So I'm going to show a couple examples of how that's been done, and then the demographics template, which helps with the per capita and the per household numbers. Pretty straightforward there. So here's a couple examples. It's 15 questions spread out over like 5 pages, and each section is really organized in ways for disposal, recycling, composting, and so on and so forth. And so states that have very detailed information are asked and encouraged to provide that detailed information at that kind of per material number. And then there's also the opportunity to say, no, we don't have that detailed information yet, but we can provide that total number. And that's really important, not only for apples to apples comparisons at the high level when you don't have detailed information at each state, but what we're starting to see, which is really exciting, is being able to start driving towards getting that detailed information at the state levels. And I'm starting to see states adjusting the way they're collecting the data, which is really exciting to be able to get more detailed information over time. So exported information, and this pulls through to the analytical reports, which I'll show you in a second. Energy recovery, and then the SMM resources module. And previous speaker, I think it was the doctor. Someone had presented and talked about choosing between eating and sleeping. And the minute I hear a challenge like that, like you can't choose, I'm like, oh man, like breakfast in bed is the solution to choosing between eating and sleeping. And so the SMM resources module is kind of like that choosing between. You don't have to choose between the two. They're both in the same system. You can access them both at the same time. If you grab a snack while you're doing it and set up a hammock, you can do all 4 things at the same time if you're really talented. But being able to access that SMM resources module is really, really helpful. It's pre-populating a lot of the information that doesn't need to be updated on a regular basis, but allows for the information that should be updated to make that happen as well. Feedback form, pretty straightforward, but effective. So a couple examples of how that feedback was used to improve the forms, and they're pretty basic examples just because I'm not going to go into a lot of great detail, but for example, incinerator without energy recovery was added as far as a final destination in the past. That was provided through the feedback form and then implemented in the template. And then there was some, not confusion, but not easily accessible information for some of the states that wanted to have average households. And so being able to easily access a report within, as you're filling out the template, that would generate, and you could choose the state and identify your state there, and it would pull through information on how to access that number is now available. And that, again, from the feedback form has been really useful. Demographic information is pretty straightforward. Okay, so the user experience and data quality, and that's what I can speak to because I've helped sit in many meetings internally to talk about how to use software to really help streamline the experience of the states that are in there, and listen to your feedback from a technology solution. So some ways that the state measurement program has been able to utilize some of those features is pre-populated fields. I'd referenced this in the past, but it can be really useful. We've all got a lot of things to do, and really, when I think of using data, it's using the results of data, not entering the data into a system. So the quicker you can streamline information that doesn't need to be re-entered, that's really important. So being able to pre-populate from prior years, the states that have contributed in the past, you'll see that pull through, and the information that obviously you shouldn't need to fill out is pre-populated, which is really handy. Being able to compare your data, even if it's not pre-populated from the prior year, is really helpful to be able to see that summary. Not only to be able to see how you've evolved over time, but being able to reference prior years to make sure those numbers aren't completely kind of out of whack. I'd mentioned that there's 15 questions over about 5 pages. It would be really horrible if you couldn't save that and you had to do it all in one go, especially since some of this is very detailed information. So being able to save that progress and access it at any time is definitely something that is useful. When I was first asked to come up and talk about a couple of these things, I'm so used to being able to show the software live. And so I was like, oh, there's no internet, what the heck am I gonna do? It was a blessing in disguise. This would have been a disaster if I was using a mouse all over the place. But as you can see from this fancy GIF, we have hoverovers within the software that can help the user as they're moving through with standardizing definitions and showing those standardizing definitions, which is really important. Being able to access the definitions that all of the states have worked towards and finalized over years is very accessible, and then supporting documentation is all accessible via the state measurement program. Industry involvement, we'd mentioned kind of that collaboration aspect and how important it is to continue to evolve measurement from a collaborative standpoint. And so the state measurement program really, I think, has this opportunity to continue to evolve with state feedback and industry involvement. This is an example of the plastic terminology that's evolving over time being implemented in the state measurement program. And then the analytical report. So as I'd previously mentioned, it's really nice when you can not only gather the data, but start to analyze it. And Rhonda is going to do me the favor of showing off all the analytical reports. So I'm gonna save all the fancy charts and graphs for her presentation, but really there are, I believe, over 50 analytical reports that are available to the states and to the entire group. So being able to access those analytical reports in an easy way is important. Being able to quickly generate reports on the SMM resource module about, this is an example of the states having overall waste diversion goals, and being able to drill into that data really quickly and easily is important. Being able to switch those charts so you're not having to regenerate those charts each time. Heat maps and being able to identify, this is import tonnages, being able to drill down into each state and see where that, whether it's the solid waste or recycling imports are coming from, being able to click on a specific state and see that breakdown is available. Interactive tables, being able to export and analyze that data over time. And then saving the charts, of course, so that you can use them in presentations such as this. Those of you who has generated an analytical report in the state measurement program, another raise of hands. Okay, perfect. I'm here all week. There are a ton of different options as far as being able to analyze this data. Sometimes it can be overwhelming, but it's because of the breadth of the different ways that the states are wanting to slice and dice this data, which is really exciting. So being able to access the filters to be able to choose your specific region and just generate data on the EPA region 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, being able to do that really quickly and easily, or just choose your state and generate that report to see how your state compares to another state is really easy to do, and being able to drill into each one of those. Finally, being able to share this information is something that the state measurement program has taken advantage of, being able to publish a public profile to be able to share some of these reports so that you don't need to log in. So once that data has been finalized and verified, being able to create this public interface, which is shared on Recycle Search, which is another feature of Re-TRAC Connect. This is an example of Ohio, but all of these profiles can be created free by each of the states at any time. So if you're looking for information on how to do that, you can share those reports, whether it's in a static view or even make some of those filterable charts via a dynamic report, and being able to allow the public or a stakeholder that you're wanting to send this report to be able to generate that report without needing login access is something that's now possible over the last year. and then they're all connected. So ultimately, being able to share this information really makes us stronger and really allows us to pull together this information in a cohesive, coherent manner. And so being able to publish each of those states onto that one map and be able to access those reports in a public fashion is helpful. So that's pretty much it for my introduction. I'll do a shameless plug. Rick, I was going to say my president. That's kind of weird to say. President of Emergent Knowledge, speaking on a panel tomorrow at 1 p.m. So definitely, I know you're all here. So he's going to be talking about the municipal measurement program, and so really talking about building off of the state measurement program at a municipal level, and really focusing on that at a local perspective. So that's it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Chris. And I've been really excited about being able to use the state measurement program to enter our data in and then to compare it to other states. Haven't had a chance to really focus on that, so I'm hoping that in the future I can work with it more. I'm really excited to hear about the municipal program tomorrow. I'm hoping that we can get our communities more involved in actually entering data and make it a little easier for all of us to get the statewide data. Our next speaker is going to go a little bit more into, before I do that, I want to remind everybody that we will be taking questions. So if you have a question for the speakers about the state measurement program, please write those down and get them to one of the people standing. We'll come and get it. If you want to just raise your hand or something, let them know, wave at them to let them know that you have a question. We'll try and get those answered for you. Our next speaker is Rhonda Rollins. She is an environmental scientist with EPA Region 4 in Atlanta and has worked with EPA for 14 years. She works with the voluntary programs to facilitate recycling, reuse, and energy conservation with industry, government, and individual homes. And she likes to call that the warm, fuzzy side of EPA. And we all like to have a warm, fuzzy side of our agency because regulation is great and needs to be there, but it's also good to be able to actually go out and help people without them being scared that you're coming to see them. And I asked her to give me a little bit of information about just a fun fact. The first thing she told me is that she still uses a flip phone, and she may be the only one that does that. Well, I've seen other flip phones at this meeting, so you're not the only one. But she has traveled to Australia 3 times, was it? So she is a traveler, and Chris is also a traveler, and lots of us like to travel. So with no further ado, Rhonda.
Thank you for that. And I can definitely relate to what Betsy said. In fact, I came from enforcement to begin with, and I definitely didn't like showing up, and nobody wants to see you. That's really not very good for the ego, for nobody to want to see you. So now that I'm in voluntary programs, I get to focus more, like I said, on the warm, fuzzy side. Now, as Chris had mentioned, of course, there are lots and lots of reports available within the state measurement program for states to utilize. And with so many choices, you might kind of wonder, well, where might be the best place for me to start? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover, say, the 4 to 5 reports that I find myself constantly coming back to, and maybe talk about some ways that you can take advantage of those reports for your own state usage. So the ones that we're going to be covering are economics, a heat map related to tipping fees, the pay-as-you-throw program, state funding, and landfill bans. Now, before I get into the reports themselves, how might you use that for your usage as well? So just to give you some ideas, so for your state, you may be asked things like, so how much did you compost last year? Or how do your FTEs and staffing compare to other states? And can those comparisons be used to help you in future budget discussions? Who has landfill bans, and what are the specifics of those that you can learn from if your state is looking to also implement a ban? So just a few of those ideas. As far as the reports themselves, of course, you'll start with the general login into the Re-TRAC system. You'll always go to the state measurement program and to your specific state account. Now, whenever we're looking to do reports, you always start at the analytics tabs, which is at the top of the bar. So we'll always go back to that. And then you find the specific report that you're looking for. 3 of the ones that we'll focus on today are highlighted here with the orange arrows. And we're going to be starting with the economic benefits that you see here. Since I won't be able to cover all of the choices that you'll have available to you, I just wanted to kind of give you a sampling of what other options you would have within the system for reporting options. So starting with report number 1, this is the economic benefits report. And anybody who's worked with me for very long on this one knows that this is my absolute favorite go-to report. I would say that probably 70% of the questions that I get asked in my job related to measurement, I can go to this one report 70% of the time, and this is where I'll find those answers. So I'd already shown you what it would look like as far as finding the economic benefits. As Chris had mentioned, there's lots of filters. You simply select who you want to be compared to. I tend to choose on this report, on the right-hand side here, you'll see number 5, all reports. I tend to choose that one so that it's all in one place, but you have the options. And the first report we get here is economics subreport number 1. This is where you're going to find all of your tonnage information. So I regularly get asked from managers or the public things like, so how much did Region 4 recycle this year? Or how did Tennessee's composting compare to Florida's? Or what was the total disposal across the entire region? And this is where you get those kind of numbers from. I've skipped report number 2, which is pounds per person. This is where, let's say you wanted to know for Florida, how much do they recycle on a pounds per person per year basis? That's where you'd go for that kind of information. For economic report number 3, landfill cost avoidance, we get 2 really good numbers, really important numbers from this report. Of course, there is the tipping fees, which, we regularly get calls and questions about tipping fees. But the second important number is the landfill cost avoidance. Now, we are always trying to stress to the public and to policymakers, there's a true quantitative economic impact to recycling and waste reduction. Of course, that equation is a 2-part equation. There's, of course, how much did you save by not having to landfill? That's the first number here. The second half of that equation can be found on the next report, and that is, so how much did you get paid, hopefully, for your recyclables? So then you get your net economic benefit. As a Region 4 example, our benefit was $3.6 billion. Those are some pretty impressive numbers, along with the jobs estimated of creation of about 40,000. Now, I would imagine that almost all of us can think of a community out there that is just, as a result of budget constraints, is having to look at cutting various programs. And it's not hard to imagine that recycling is sometimes, an easy target for that. But I actually believe that the reason for that is that a lot of these policymakers and budget decision makers mistakenly believe that recycling is this warm, fuzzy, tree-hugging activity. They really don't realize the true economic impact that it could have to the economy and to a community. So being able to bring these kind of hard, solid, quantitative numbers to policymakers I believe can give them the kind of information they need to make a more informed decision, if they're going to have to cut programs somewhere. And from this one report, the economic benefits, it's very easy to generate snapshots of this nature. These are great to drop into any sort of sustainability reporting you may have to do, any education outreach that you're looking to do for the public, and great for policymakers and legislators to give them a good overview of what's going on in your state or your region as it relates to materials management. So report number 2 is heat maps. As Chris mentioned, there is a capability of doing heat maps for a variety of different things. I have focused on tipping fees here. One, because I wanted to give you another example as to how a state could utilize this information to their benefit. So this is an actual example that happened a while back. An angry citizen called their legislator complaining about their landfill tipping fees. So the legislator called their state environmental agency, wanted to know why are our landfill fees so high, and how do we compare to the states around us? And of course, he wanted an answer like right then, of course. Well, prior to this program, that state would have had to have reached out to each of the states around them, asked the question by phone or email, waited for them to gather the information, get it back to them, combine it, and then respond to the legislator. That's easily going to take days, maybe weeks, maybe even in the months, depending on how fast they can get the information together. With the advent of the state measurement program, that state avoids all of that. They log into the system, they choose who they want to compare themselves to, whether it's just one state or another region, the whole country, and bada bing, bada boom, they've got an answer. Now, they have the option of having it in a tabular form that Chris had shown earlier, or you can do it in a heat map. So here you'd select the year, and here you have it in a nice visual representation. You can respond back to the legislator extremely quickly for those kind of requests, whether that's policymakers, the public, whoever. So on to report number 3. We actually have an option within the template. As Chris had mentioned, there are 15 individual questions. You have the capability of creating an individual report for each of those 15 questions, if that's a focus area you want to push towards. So we're just going to focus on state funding for this particular one. Of course, you'll return to analytics, as I had mentioned. Scroll down to question 1 through 15. Select your various options. In this particular case, as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at state funding, which is question 14. And this is basically what that report will give you. It'll give you an indication by state as to who's getting their funding from taxes or surcharges, grants, general fund transfers. And hopefully that kind of information can be very helpful for you when you go to your policymakers to have budget discussions for funding for your particular state. And report number 4, pay-as-you-throw. We've got a couple of different pay-as-you-throw programs, reports, One to just get the solid numbers. How many pay-as-you-throw programs does Michigan have, for example? That would be found in question 6C. When you want to find out more about how a pay-as-you-throw program in a state works, you're going to go to the pay-as-you-throw program narrative report. Again, as always, return to your analytics, choose that particular report, make your various selections, and then you can get a good sense of which states are actively promoting pay-as-you-throw programs. Now, I regularly get calls from communities who they're thinking about starting a pay-as-you-throw program, but they're a little nervous about just, jumping out there with not a lot of information, so they would love to talk to a community, preferably in their state, that's done it and learn from them. Well, we haven't had a really good list to really refer them to. What this does is it allows us to generate the report and say, okay, well, Michigan looks like they have a lot of programs, or Alabama or Florida or South Dakota, and we can give them the contact information for them to reach out to that state counterpart to get more information from states who are supporting local pay-as-you-throw. And my final report that I'm going to talk to you a little bit about is landfill bans. So I know that there are many states who are looking at the potential to implement landfill bans on various commodities. So if you're looking to find out who's already done it and maybe learn from how did they manage to get that through the legislature and how's that working for them and is it going pretty well, this will give you some of the contact information and background that you can use for that. As I mentioned, you return to analytics, choose your defaults, and then you basically have a listing of what states have landfill ban programs. More importantly, it will actually delineate for you who's focusing on yard waste and who's actually also trying to work on food waste as a landfill ban. So depending on where you are in your process, you can determine who you want to reach out to. Now, I know we've covered a lot of information in this particular session, so I just want to give a very quick recap. So Chris walked you through how the template module works, how it's been tweaked and improved over the years, and how we're continuing to work to improve that, both for data quality and for the reporting system itself. And he also talked about how states can utilize the free Recycle Search tool to share some of those reports and data results with the general public. I've walked you through some of the reports that I find myself using quite a bit. Hopefully you'll be able to take advantage of some of those examples or find other reports that work even better for you. I've also, as you've heard before, this last reporting period, we had 37 states and DC participate in the input, which we're really, really excited about. Of course, nationwide participation is our ultimate goal, and so I'm really hoping, I'd really like to encourage the rest of you to jump on board with us. But I realize that over the last several years, we've put a lot of focus on data collection, get the numbers in the system, get the numbers in the system. In fact, my Region 4 states know that I call and aggravate them quite a bit about putting in data in the system. But sometimes it can get sort of lost in the message that it's not just the collecting that we want. There's a lot of capability and reporting functions and analytics available in this system. And I just want to encourage each of you to really make sure that you're taking that next step and you're using those reports, whether it is to help you in future budget discussions or help you find a state who's doing a program that you'd like to implement and you want to learn from them. Make sure that you're using that reporting capability to improve your programs and to help the states around you improve theirs. Okay. And thank you very much.
Thank you both. We have had quite a few questions coming in. And so let's see. The first one that I think we need to answer is who reports into the state measurement program and who can access it. So, Chris or Rhonda, how do you go about getting access to it? Who is eligible for access? And how do you get access to it?
So, any state,
I think there's a mic on its way up.
okay. well, while he's coming up. So any state can access the system. They simply need to get a free login from Emerge Knowledge. They'll be happy to give you login credentials. We also have a few examples of where some organizations have been given read-only access. A good example of that is CERTIC. We've been working with a few industries and associations who are looking for some of that data. Theirs is only read access accounts, but any state can get access to review the information or to input the data for free. Agency, a state agency.
The other thing is, how complete is the data in Re-TRAC? Policies, number of states reporting, economic benefits, et cetera. So I know it's being entered voluntarily by the states, and your report said 38 the last?
37 plus DC.
37 plus DC for the last entry period. So as we get more people involved, it's going to be more and more complete.
No one leaves this room until there's 50.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
And I would like to stress that you can put as much or as little detail. Sorry. I've been told I have an outside voice, so apparently not enough. You can put as much or as little detail into the system as you want. I mean, we've had a couple of states who said, look, all I get is disposal data at the moment. That's great. Put in what you have. You may find that over time, policies change and you're able to get better data or more data. Start wherever you are. Come on board now, and we'll work to see what else you can get later. And if you can't get more later, that's okay too. So.
Then we also had, and I think you're going to have to answer these, a couple about how the SMP interacts with other data. For instance, can SMP pull data directly from the U.S. Census data, and does the SMP data tie into EPA's facts and figures, which is now the SMM report?
So the census data, technically, that is a possibility. I believe right now it is being populated before each year. It is in there before the states go in to fill out their annual 15 questions. So it is being taken from the census. And then the second question, whether it's integrating with the
facts and figures,
not at this time. No.
Okay. And Rhonda, I'm not sure whether you can answer that one or not. How is the state measurement program funded? Do you know? Or do you need to pull somebody else in?
Yeah, I would.
Sorry, I missed that question.
How is the SMP program funded?
A little above my pay grade.
I figured it would be.
All right. So just from that point, just to clarify kind of EPA's role in this. Oh, sorry. Who am I? Ron Vance from EPA headquarters. So, I think just the one thing to clarify in this all is this effort really began amongst the states and has been led amongst the states. EPA's involvement has been as a facilitator in this process. So as part of that, answering the question, who pays, EPA has been paying with an arrangement with Emerge to provide the platform for states to use for this piece. And so the other point to make clear is that it's free for states. because EPA is kind of paying for that infrastructure. For the basic piece, yes. There are add-on functions that you can do if you want to use and leverage Re-TRAC to do your own data collection amongst your reporters, which EPA is not paying for. So, yes.
Thank you. Then we have several questions about how we make changes in the system. For instance, as new materials are covered under stewardship programs, how does that get into the system? How do we decide on the definitions that we're using? Because states are all different. And then whether there's a possibility that, well, they want to know if it covers plastic bag bans or polystyrene bans at the moment. I can answer that. It does not at the moment, but that doesn't mean we couldn't add it in the future. But as far as adding, either one of you want to take?
Well, just quickly going back to the question asker, if your a state agency can, I would believe, get involved with the implementation team and kind of take a larger role as far as participating in kind of evolving the state measurement program itself. The feedback form is definitely there. And then also this afternoon, I believe we're going to be talking about challenges with the kind of data collection process and opportunities. And so kind of jot those things down throughout the morning. And then I think there'll be kind of some tabletop discussions to talk about those components as well, if I've got that correct. So someone just tell me if I'm speaking out of turn here.
Want to add anything?
Take a stab at that. Don't want to speak out of turn.
Oh, no worries. Okay, so again, building off of that, I think the big thing that we try to do every year, the feedback form is key. If you haven't filled out the feedback form, that is the key piece that I know that the team that works on this really takes each one of those comments in, and really that's the starting ground for the next year. But really this is a year-to-year kind of iteration. It's a term of kind of continuous improvement as we go on, realizing as more people get involved, as we'll talk about in the next couple of days, as the data needs and measurement needs evolve, that this system will evolve too. So it is a year-to-year piece. The state feedback form is vital for that, but there are other opportunities throughout the year. As was mentioned, there's going to be a dialogue here. We host dialogues at other conferences as well as reaching out either to members of the I-team or the folks at EPA that are helping kind of coordinate and getting feedback in that way. But every year we do relook. Usually later in the spring is when those decisions get a little more real, so we can get around to launching in the fall. But definitely, if you have thoughts, feedback, look for ways to do that, and definitely share later today.
So this would be a good time to make a plug for the implementation team and to let you know a little bit about it. We do have regular calls to discuss those types of things. If you're interested in being a part of that, just let me know and I'll get that information to the folks who start the team.
Then we had one on how do the states get the data for their reports, and that's all going to be different depending on the state and your requirements. I can tell you for Arkansas, it's voluntary. We send out annual surveys to all the recycling facilities in the state and also to companies that we know are recycling, whether it's just recycling their own materials or whether they're taking in materials from other businesses. So we send that out voluntarily. We have a person on staff that has worked very hard to cultivate those contacts with the businesses and get the businesses reporting, because that's where most of your data is going to come from. The local facilities generally feed into one of those businesses. And so to make sure we're not double counting numbers, we ask where that material is going to so that we can make sure we're not double counting. Are there other states here who would like to tell a little bit, maybe do things differently, and would like to tell a little bit about how they're getting their data? Anybody?
Don't be shy.
Come on. Seth, come on. Come on. Tell us how you're getting your data.
Get the ball rolling. So, plug for my presentation after lunch. I know it's after lunch in Chattanooga, and we're having an early spring. It's pretty nice outside, but come to my presentation. Yeah, so just like everyone up here said, we all are going to have different authorities in the room in terms on how we collect our data. Sometimes at the voluntary, to us, we have statutory and regulatory authority to gather some of these facilities. So I think as we are going into our tabletop discussions towards the end of this afternoon, we really want to hear those barriers, because that's going to be a barrier in getting into the system and putting the data in there. And how can we, as the I team, address those barriers so we can have everyone report, so we can get on the same page on maybe addressing those issues, so that we can figure out how to assist you on how to collect that data, because we have various methods on how we collect the data that might assist. But yeah, so stay tuned. I want everyone to keep that dialogue going, because we really do want to address those barriers so we can get all 50 of us to report, so we can kind of see where everyone's at and see how, when you see my presentation today and Matt Hiddle's presentation today, we're going to talk about how we've kind of used this system to implement some things in our own programs, so to give you guys some good ideas on moving forward. And please, for those who are not reporting, get with us and we'll get you into the system, like Chris said, so we can get that dialogue started.
There was a question about your presentation, Rhonda. What I heard was material value plus landfill cost avoidance equals economic net benefit. Does this take into account the costs of recycling?
Not currently. It's simply a tipping fee average to let you know what the cost avoidance is, and then just an average estimated revenue to calculate the recycling revenue.
And then hang on, because the other question was, how was the $100 per ton value for recyclable material get determined?
That is a very good question. When this started several years ago, of course, recycling was chugging right along, and $100 was actually a kind of run-of-the-mill, relatively conservative number. We realize in the current economic situation that may be a bit optimistic. We haven't changed it at this point. We are definitely considering that, but you can always also, if you're concerned about that, go into the system, because you'll have the tonnages, and recalculate that based on a lower number for your own purposes if need be.
And there was a question on, is there a way to email the data, or to email people who enter the data to ask questions about what they've entered? Is there a way for people to email within?
That may be more of a
Chris?
If I understand the question correctly, is there a way to contact one of the state agencies that has entered the data to ask them questions about the data?
I think that's what.
Okay, let's assume that's the question. And so there, in the resources module, there'll be contacts, I believe, for every single one of the states that is contributing. And yes, so the answer is ultimately yes. There's a human behind each one of those state agencies that's entering that data, and you can get the information you need. Also, if one of those states has published a free profile, that I'd referenced earlier, the contact information is typically easily accessible and on those profiles right beside the data that's being shared. So,
But you cannot email directly from the system, the program. You have to take that email address, or is there a link that you can link to email to them?
If it's an email, no, they'd have to email directly.
They'd have to email directly.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Excellent. I think.
And it looks like we are about out of time. So I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions. There was one last question I did want to mention. There were a couple on can reports capture information on the local level, or can a local government agency be involved in this? And that's the new module, the SMM module, that is going to be discussed tomorrow, would be for local municipalities. So, thank you both. We have a break now for about 15 minutes, and then we'll start back here at 10:30. Thanks. That's for you. That's for you.
Good seeing you, man. You can take, I don't know if you guys brought you.